1. Stress hormones flood the brain when we encounter stress. Whether from work, relationships, or unexpected life events, our brain activates a system designed to protect us. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis. This system releases two major stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. Adrenaline increases heart rate, blood pressure, and energy availability, giving the body an immediate burst of strength and alertness. Cortisol, often called the stress hormone, ensures that enough glucose is available to fuel the brain and muscles during challenging situations. In short bursts, this is helpful. It prepares us for quick reactions, sharper awareness, and survival. However, when stress is chronic, such as dealing with constant financial strain, toxic work environments, or long-term illness, these hormones remain elevated for extended periods. Cortisol, in particular, becomes harmful when it lingers. Instead of supporting the brain, it starts to disrupt communication between different brain regions. High cortisol levels interfere with the balance of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, which regulate mood, reward, and focus. This imbalance can lead to irritability, lack of motivation, and mood swings. Moreover, an overexposure to stress hormones triggers inflammation in the brain. Neuroinflammation has been linked to both mental health disorders and neurodegenerative diseases. People under chronic stress often experience brain fog, a state of mental fatigue where it becomes harder to think clearly or process information. In essence, stress hormones are not inherently bad. They are vital for survival in short bursts. The problem arises when the system never shuts off. Chronic flooding of cortisol and adrenaline essentially keeps the brain in survival mode, preventing it from resting, repairing, and performing higher-level cognitive tasks. 2. Hippocampus damage, memory, and learning. The hippocampus is the part of the brain primarily responsible for forming new memories and linking them with emotions and context. It also plays a crucial role in learning. Unfortunately, the hippocampus is one of the brain regions most vulnerable to stress. Prolonged exposure to cortisol can physically shrink the hippocampus, impairing both short-term and long-term memory functions. Research has shown that individuals under chronic stress perform poorly on memory-related tasks. For example, students who experience test anxiety often find it difficult to recall studied information during exams, even though they know the material. This occurs because stress hormones suppress the hippocampus's ability to retrieve stored information efficiently. Over time, repeated exposure to stress reduces the volume of neurons in this region, making learning and memory retention increasingly difficult. Stress doesn't just affect memory recall, but also learning new information. The hippocampus is central to neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons. Chronic stress hinders this process, reducing the brain's ability to adapt, reorganize, and strengthen itself through new experiences. This is why stressed individuals often feel stuck, unable to learn from mistakes or build new coping mechanisms. Additionally, the weakening of the hippocampus interferes with emotional regulation. Since this region interacts closely with both the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, its damage means emotions can become overwhelming or uncontrollable. This is commonly seen in stress-related disorders like PTSD, where intrusive memories and emotional flashbacks dominate mental life. In conclusion, while the hippocampus is critical for memory and learning, stress erodes its efficiency and structure. Over time, stress transforms the hippocampus from being a hub of memory and adaptability into a weakened area that struggles with recall, regulation, and growth. 3. Prefrontal cortex impairment. Thinking and decision-making. The prefrontal cortex, PFC, located at the front of the brain, is the command center for high-level thinking. It is responsible for decision-making, focus, problem-solving, impulse control, and planning. When we are calm and focused, the PFC functions efficiently, allowing us to weigh consequences and make rational choices. However, stress has a direct negative impact on this region. Under stress, the brain prioritizes survival instincts over thoughtful reasoning. The flood of cortisol suppresses PFC activity while strengthening more primitive brain structures like the amygdala. This shift means that instead of analyzing situations carefully, stressed individuals often respond with knee-jerk reactions driven by fear or impulse. This is why people under pressure sometimes make rash decisions or say things they later regret. In workplaces, stress reduces productivity by impairing concentration and working memory. Employees dealing with high stress may find it hard to focus on tasks, get easily distracted, or struggle to organize their thoughts. Students, stress before exams not only disrupts memory via the hippocampus, but also interferes with reasoning, leading to poor performance even when they've studied adequately. Chronic stress further deteriorates the PFC by reducing gray matter volume. Brain imaging studies reveal that individuals exposed to long-term stress often show less density in PFC regions compared to those who manage stress well. This physical change translates into lasting difficulties in judgment, emotional control, and self-regulation. Ultimately, the impairment of the prefrontal cortex under stress shifts the brain from logical, deliberate thinking to survival-driven impulsivity. Instead of carefully weighing long-term outcomes, people under chronic stress become trapped in reactive behaviors, increasing mistakes, conflicts, and regrets. 4. Amygdala overactivation, fear, and anxiety. The amygdala is the brain's emotional alarm system. It detects threats and triggers the fear response, ensuring quick action in dangerous situations. In short-term stress, the amygdala's activation is protective. It sharpens attention to potential risks and prepares the body for defense. However, under chronic stress, the amygdala becomes overactive, leading to heightened fear and anxiety. When stress hormones flood the brain, the amygdala strengthens its neural pathways, becoming hypersensitive to perceived dangers. This means that even minor challenges, like a critical email from a boss or a small argument, can trigger an exaggerated stress reaction. Over time, the brain rewires itself so that fear responses dominate, while calming signals from the prefrontal cortex weaken. This imbalance results in a cycle of increased anxiety and reduced ability to regulate emotions. Neuroscientific studies show that people living with chronic stress or trauma often have an enlarged amygdala. This enlargement correlates with heightened vigilance, exaggerated startle responses, and difficulties calming down after stressful events. In daily life, this translates into being constantly on edge, unable to relax, and prone to overreacting. The amygdala's overactivation also contributes to mood disorders. For example, in generalized anxiety disorder, or PTSD, the amygdala remains hyper-alert, interpreting neutral situations as threatening. This makes individuals more prone to panic attacks, emotional outbursts, or avoidance behaviors. In essence, stress transforms the amygdala from a helpful guardian into an overbearing dictator. Instead of protecting us from real threats, it starts perceiving danger everywhere, keeping the brain locked in a state of hyperarousal. Without balance from the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus, the amygdala's dominance can severely impair emotional well-being. 5. Reduced neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to form new neural connections and adapt to experiences. It's the foundation of learning, recovery from injury, and resilience to life's challenges. Stress, however, significantly reduces neuroplasticity, limiting the brain's adaptability. Cortisol disrupts the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus, impairing the brain's capacity to rewire itself. This is why people under chronic stress often feel stuck in repetitive patterns of thought and behavior. They literally have fewer pathways to create new responses. For example, someone overwhelmed by stress may continue using unhelpful coping strategies, like avoidance or overeating, because the brain struggles to generate healthier alternatives. Stress also weakens synaptic plasticity, the process by which neurons strengthen or weaken their connections based on experience. Without robust synaptic plasticity, learning slows down, problem-solving becomes harder, and recovery from trauma or mental health challenges is delayed. At the molecular level, stress reduces levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, a protein that supports neuron growth and survival. Low BDNF has been linked to depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. Essentially, when stress is chronic, the brain's biological fertilizer dries up, making it harder to grow new connections. The result is a less flexible brain, one that struggles to adapt to change, bounce back from setbacks, or embrace new opportunities. In contrast, a brain supported by low stress and healthy coping strategies thrives with adaptability, creativity, and resilience. Thus, chronic stress doesn't just affect moment-to-moment thinking. It reshapes the very architecture of the brain, reducing its ability to grow, learn, and evolve. 6. Increased risk of mental health issues. One of the most significant consequences of chronic stress is its role in the development of mental health disorders. The interplay between stress hormones, neurotransmitters, and structural brain changes creates fertile ground for conditions like depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Stress reduces serotonin and dopamine activity, neurotransmitters essential for regulating mood, motivation, and reward. With low levels of these chemicals, individuals are more prone to feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and loss of interest. This is why chronic stress is considered one of the strongest risk factors for depression. For anxiety disorders, the overactivation of the amygdala, combined with a weakened prefrontal cortex, creates a brain environment dominated by fear and worry. People living under chronic stress often describe feeling trapped in a state of constant nervousness, unable to relax or enjoy life. In PTSD, stress becomes especially damaging. Trauma imprints itself on the amygdala, hippocampus, and prefrontal cortex, leading to intrusive memories, hypervigilance, and emotional flashbacks. Stress not only initiates PTSD, but also worsens its progression. Chronic stress has also been linked to long-term cognitive decline. Studies suggest that individuals who experience prolonged stress are at higher risk for dementia and Alzheimer's disease later in life. The brain's reduced neuroplasticity, hippocampal shrinkage, and neuroinflammation collectively accelerate cognitive aging. In short, stress doesn't just affect mood, it lays the foundation for psychiatric and neurological disorders. By weakening protective brain systems and amplifying vulnerability, stress transforms temporary struggles into long-lasting mental health challenges. 7. Physical brain changes. Beyond mood and cognition, chronic stress can physically reshape the brain. Advances in neuroimaging reveal that people experiencing long-term stress show structural changes in gray and white matter. These changes affect regions responsible for memory, decision-making, and emotional regulation. One of the most well-documented effects is the shrinking of the hippocampus. As discussed earlier, this reduction in size is linked to memory problems and emotional instability. At the same time, the amygdala often enlarges, reinforcing fear and anxiety circuits. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex thins, reducing impulse control and decision-making ability. Stress also affects the brain's white matter, which connects different regions. Chronic stress increases myelin production around certain pathways, reinforcing circuits related to fear and stress while neglecting those linked to rational thought. This imbalance makes it easier for the brain to default to anxiety-driven responses. Furthermore, prolonged stress can damage the blood-brain barrier, the protective shield that regulates what enters the brain. A weakened barrier increases vulnerability to toxins and inflammation, further contributing to cognitive decline. These physical changes are not just theoretical, they manifest in daily life. People under chronic stress often experience memory lapses, poor focus, difficulty controlling emotions, and heightened sensitivity to stress. The good news is that some of these brain changes can be reversed. Stress management practices like meditation, exercise, and therapy have been shown to restore hippocampal volume, strengthen prefrontal cortex activity, and reduce amygdala hyperactivity. Thus, while chronic stress physically alters brain structure, resilience-building activities can help the brain recover, highlighting the importance of proactive mental health care.